All right, to this now, a new Oxfam report shows that billionaires are 4,000 more times likely to hold a political office than ordinary citizens. The annual Inequalities report also shows that a number of billionaires has surpassed the 3,000 mark for the first time, and the level of billionaire wealth is now higher than at any time in history. At the same time, 1 in 4 people globally face hunger. I'm joined now in studio by Isobel Frye, Oxfam Policy Advisor. Isobel, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, these are staggering, terrifying, really, numbers. Billionaire wealth has grown 3 times faster than in the previous 5 years. What do you make of this?
Thanks very much for having me and having this conversation. And I think especially following on from South Africa's G20 last year, where President Ramaphosa commissioned the Stiglitz report on inequality, this is a really important conversation for us to be leading with in South Africa. The Davos report that you refer to, which was released last week in Davos, is a significant call to action to change things. The rate and acceleration of the growth of the wealth of billionaires is almost exponential. And the problem is that when billionaires make money, you've got to ask along the value chain who's losing out on that. And so one of the other statistics in the report is that the $2.5 trillion growth that billionaires made last year, so just in 2025, the accumulated growth was 2.5 trillion, and that could have solved world poverty 26 times over. So it's not about the fact that we do not have the resources, it's the allocation, and it's also the reduction of the kinds of regulations that used to monitor excess growth. And so we look at things like taxation, we look at the ways in which monopolies are allowed to accumulate, and the fact that within that, you see the rise of oligarchies, which in fact means the control of political power by a few, usually because of the wealth. And so in the past, Oxfam's also looked at the building of elite pacts between the political elite and the wealthy elite. So where you see Trump being in office and reducing the kinds of tax rates on corporations, the refusal to sign America up for a global minimum wealth tax on global corporations. There is a very strong and steady path towards the reduction of the control by states, and that means that the smaller person, the middle classes, the working classes, and the unemployed, they completely are cut out of any kind of benefit.
And then end up in the 1 out of 4 people who are facing hunger, right? So would you say then this $2.5 trillion growth that you say could eradicate poverty 26 times over? Yeah. Is this a failure then on economics, Isobel, or on a political will?
I think we need to accept that it's built over a number of decades. And in the mid-1980s and 1990s, we started to see the dismantling of regulation. So prior to that, especially in the global north, you had the notion of the welfare state, where the state was at the heart of regulating distribution, seeing where excesses were worked and redistributing. Because that's in essence what we're looking at, is the health and wealth of economies. And we saw the rise of a neoliberal economics that said, like, big is great. Billionaires are good people because they're making a lot of money. And so the demise of the amount of wealth, global wealth, going to states. So, for instance, 1 trip to the moon, like how many hospitals could be built? And where a hospital is built, not only are people involved and getting jobs in the construction, nurses and doctors are employed. So you have that beneficial. People's health is being addressed. And all in all, and so when they're sick, they take fewer days off in terms of sick leave. So those are the beneficial cycles which are being reduced, because instead we see the reduction of kinds of regulations, but also we get told that if the wealthy make a lot of money, the wealth will trickle down. But it doesn't.
That's right.
So instead you see the rise of a couple of 3,000 billionaires globally at the cost of misery. And not only is it misery of individuals who don't have food to eat, but it's also the kinds of activities undertaken by billionaires, the private jets, the trips to the moon. They all have a significant impact on our environments as well. And we know that the world is struggling in terms of emissions, and these are not the activities that aid a healthy world and a healthy population.
I mean, I want to venture slightly into the moral questions before we return into the findings of the report. But why do you think this is? Why do you think that society takes billionaires or people with money more seriously than they would the destitute?
It's a really interesting question. We were chatting about this offline, and there has to be a reason why the rise of somebody who has more than me makes me think that they are better than me. But also, I mean, if you look at the fact that a large number of 7 out of the 10 top global media houses are owned by billionaires. I'm not asking who owns yours, but the point is that the narrative is then dictated by the people who own the means of media communication. So where we see somebody who is driving their Maserati to their penthouse, that becomes the aspiration that we have. And so we think that they are better people, whereas the parents who struggle to send their kids to school, the single mum who's not able to, who has to rely on scholar transport rather than having a driver take her child to school. Those kinds of inequalities are erased. And instead we look at the single success story which society describes success to. I mean, what is a good person? That takes us down to the existential crisis. Sure. And as you were saying earlier, where we are globally is a crisis. Indicative. Now we need to start unpacking what got us there. Yeah. And the report also shows how to get us back to a better path.
So you speak about the current state of the world being indicative of these billionaires kind of slowly creeping into systems, right? I think about democracy, and just we had Fikile Mbalula address media earlier on after the party's Lekgotla, indicating that they do have a problem with politicians buying votes. And meanwhile, the organization itself is cash-strapped. What does that say about democracy and the systems put in place then to ensure that there is parity in how policies are being put in place and who runs any given country?
I think first we need to acknowledge that this is a problem the world over. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the cost of people running in the US for president or Congress, anyway, they need to have rich backers, and rich backers require payback. And I think that's something that we need to acknowledge. The point about how it erodes democracy goes further, because you often, as individual people, think that you're powerless because it's only the rich that have power. When I think about the local government elections that are coming up, I mean, that's an incredible time for people to take back people power, to ask the councillors, what was the IDP, what was the budget, and not only to hold people to account, but to move forward together strongly and say, when the next IDP is developed, I want to be there. I want to say that instead of having a new shopping mall, we actually need to have a children's park and a clinic, sure, and that the money goes there. So the combination of powerlessness because of the rise of a few and the kinds of choices that are made, the interests, it's a class interest, and it's a ruling class interest, it's a wealthy. The corruption that money brings and the ability to buy people policies. I mean, if you look at the healthcare, for instance, industry, many people say we need to have a national health system so that everybody has equal access to health. There are others who say, no, we want to keep a private sector which is registered on the stock exchange so that profits don't go back into the system, but into the hands of shareholders. It's almost as if we've got two different realities, and we need to decide, do we want to have the reality that empowers and enables people to live a decent life, or do we want to see a system where shareholders suck out the benefits and the profits? And we're told that we can't afford to have better healthcare, we can't afford to have better schools for our children because there's no money. Whereas if there was a taxation of the wealth that went back into the system, where profits didn't suck those out, I would be happier, you would be happy. We would know that the crime would drop because there would be better jobs. And it's almost as if we need to stop and say, rewind to where the values. I mean, South Africa, our constitution, just 30 years ago, the vision that it described, I was looking, for instance, at social grants yesterday. The value of the child support grant is only 19% of the upper bound poverty line.
Sure.
The social relief of distress is 13% of the value of the upper bound poverty line. That means that we are content with the fact that our children, unemployed people, are living so below the level of poverty, let alone decency. And I think that we've gotten so used to feeling disempowered. And I know that the one thing that South Africans are good at is actually taking up the challenge. And for me, I really see 2026 as being the year where we step up and say we're going to show the rest of the world. Now, one of the recommendations of the G20 Inequality report was on setting up a national inequality reduction plan. And I believe that that would be a way where we might have been closed out of the 2026 G20, but we can certainly show the world that South Africa can lead on the implementation of the 2025 G20 recommendations.
Inequality reduction plan, taxes, higher taxes for the wealthy for redistribution, some of the solutions contained in this report. Isobel Frye, what an interesting report this is. I'd really recommend that everybody read through it, just so you can also make sense of where the world is and where it may go if we do not intervene. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.